Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into Daoism, and we're really tailoring this for you given your background as a scholar in Buddhism, Eastern religions, philosophy, and, well, as an expert meditator too.
Right.
Our goal is to really get into Taoist thinking, its practices, the history, especially where it connects with those other Eastern contemplative traditions you know so well.
Sounds great. We've got some interesting material to draw on academic stuff, comparing it with Confucianism and Buddhism, general intros, the Zhuangzi itself, of course, and even something looking at Dharma and the Tao.
Okay, so the mission is to pull out the key stuff that's going to resonate with your specific, your nuanced perspective.
Exactly. And what's immediately striking is how Taoism isn't just one thing. It's philosophy, sure, but also very practical methods and a whole history tangled up with other big ideas in East Asia.
Given your background, looking at it comparatively should be pretty interesting, seeing what's unique, where it overlaps, say, with Buddhist ideas.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Early history, the big figures, Laozi comes up first, obviously.
Right, lousy. Though the sources suggest it's maybe not quite one single person we can point to on a map.
Oh, more like a composite figure.
Sort of. You hear about different people, Aaliyah from the South, Dan the historian, the zoo librarian guy.
The scribe below the pillar.
That's the one. And a master of rituals who apparently met Confucius, plus a Laozi who wrote a Taoist text. The idea is these stories might have, merged into the legend of Laozi from Cornan village.
That's fascinating. For you, knowing how philosophical lines develop, what does that composite nature suggest? Does it echo how founders are seen in other traditions you studied?
Well, it really highlights how foundational wisdom, especially in the East, often bubbles up more organically, doesn't it? It's less about one single author and maybe more about a collective understanding solidifying.
Okay.
If you think about, say, the Buddhist Sangha and how the Dharma was transmitted through a community, it resonates. The teachings attributed to Laozi become the focus, maybe more than strict biography.
So the principles themselves take center stage.
Exactly. The power is in the ideas.
Then after Laozi, we get Zhuangzi. Mid-warring states, period. He seems really key.
Oh, hugely important. He's seen as the one who really fleshed out Laozi's ideas,
Hmm.
kind of like Mencius did for Confucianism.
Ah, okay. That's a helpful parallel, his main work being the Naipian, the inner chapter.
That's right. That's considered the core.
So how did he build on Laozi? What did he add?
Well, Zhuangzi's style is just so different. The Tao Te Ching is often very concise, poetic, maybe a bit cryptic.
Right.
Zhuangzi takes those core ideas and just explodes them into stories, parables, dialogues, allegories. It's incredibly rich. He unpacks the implications. How should you actually live this stuff?
I see. So more illustrative, less aphoristic.
Yeah, and maybe brings in a stronger sense of like individual freedom, spontaneity, sometimes even challenging conventional ideas pretty directly. A bit iconoclastic.
Like Buddhist commentators expanding on the core teachings.
That's a good way to think about it, yeah.
Hmm.
Giving it more texture, more nuance through narrative and argument.
We also see a mention of the Huang Lao school, Han Dynasty. What's the significance there?
Ah, Huang Lao. That's interesting because it's an early attempt to blend Taoist philosophy with, well, more practical governing ideas,
Hmm.
often linked to legalism and the Yellow Emperor figure.
So Taoism getting into politics early on.
Kind of. It shows Taoist principles engaging with statecraft, with the real world of ruling. For you, knowing how philosophy and power often interacted elsewhere in Asia, it's a key example of early Taoist ideas being adapted, applied.
Okay, good background. Let's get into the core philosophy then, the Tao itself.
Right. The absolute center, described as the origin, the ultimate vitality, antecedent to material form.
So not a god, but more like the fundamental principle, the way things work.
Exactly. It's a set of basic principles behind how the universe changes, transforms, moves towards harmony, not a person pulling strings.
And that famous line, the Tao produces one, one produces two.
The two produce the three, and the three produce the myriad things.
Yeah.
Yeah. That lays out the whole process of unfolding, of differentiation from the source.
How does that resonate with concepts you're familiar with, like Buddhist emptiness, sunyata, or maybe Brahman and Vedanta? Is it similar, different?
That's a great question. You can see parallels. With
Hmm?
Sunyata, for instance, the Tao, before things manifest, might feel like that pregnant emptiness, not nothingness, but the potential from which everything arises.
Okay.
But maybe the Tao often carries a stronger sense of, like, inherent dynamism, this power to transform and generate. It's not passive. So maybe a slightly different emphasis than some views of emptiness.
And a core idea is embodying the way and its virtue. That sounds central to both the philosophy and the religion.
Absolutely. It's about living it, not just thinking it.
And this involves things like returning to one's true nature, valuing life, stillness, softness, contentment, spiritual liberation. Sounds quite contemplative, quite ethical.
Very much so.
How does that align with ethics or meditation in other traditions you know?
Well, returning to true nature sounds a lot like uncovering Buddha nature, doesn't it? Getting past the defilements.
It does.
Valuing life links to ahimsa, not harming. Stillness clearly mirrors samatha, mental calm in Buddhist practice. Liberation is a common goal, obviously.
Right.
But maybe the Taoist focus on admiring softness, on contentment, has a slightly different feel. Perhaps more yielding, accepting the flow, compared to maybe the rigorous detachment sometimes stressed elsewhere. It's a subtle difference in flavor.
Interesting. Then there's ki, this energy permeating everything.
Key.
Crucial. Zhuangzi talks about living by nature's law, interconnectedness, how self-centeredness causes problems. That sounds very Buddhist too, the self-grasping issue.
It really does. The idea that our problems stem from seeing ourselves as separate and special.
So as a meditator, how does ki inform Taoist practice? Is it like prana or Tibetan lung?
There are definitely parallels with subtle energy concepts like prana, but qi in Taoism is perhaps even more central as the direct focus of cultivation. It's
Yeah.
the vital life force, the stuff everything's made of. Practices like qigong or taiji are all about feeling, moving, harmonizing qi. It's seen as a direct path to health, long life, even spiritual realization. So while Buddhists recognize subtle energies, Taoists really zero in on consciously working with qi.
And that links back to Zhuangzi's point. Recognizing ki helps see the interconnectedness.
Exactly. If everything is animated by the same vital force, where's the basis for thinking you're fundamentally separate? It undermines that self-centered prejudice he talks about.
Zhuangzi also uses what the sources call sophistry to show that and this are indistinguishable.
Right, those tricky arguments and paradoxes.
Heaven and earth are like one attribute. Myriads of things are like one horse. Tao makes everything equal. That sounds incredibly non-dualistic, very Mahayana.
It absolutely is. He's using language to break down our usual mental boxes, our dualistic thinking, pointing towards that underlying unity.
From your own meditation, does that resonate? That experiential sense of interconnectedness?
Deeply. Zhuangzi's words point towards that direct experience you can have in meditation, where the lines blur, where the subject-object split starts to dissolve. That feeling that, yeah, fundamentally it is all interconnected, not just conceptually, but palpably. It cuts through our usual way of slicing up the world.
And Zhuangzi wasn't afraid to criticize others, right? Confucians, Mohists.
No, definitely not. He saw their focus on rituals, fixed morals, or strict utility as, well, artificial, going against the natural way.
There's that dialogue mentioned, Kui Ku and Laozi supposedly criticizing them, though maybe not historically accurate.
Right. It shows the perceived tension, though. Zhuangzi felt those systems could actually block you from your real connection to the Tao by focusing too much on external rules.
But later they all influenced each other, didn't they? Syncretism.
Hugely. That's a
Yeah.
key theme in Chinese thought. The initial tensions gave way to finding common ground, recognizing how different aspects, social harmony from Confucianism, inner freedom from Taoism, could actually complement each other.
Okay, let's shift to practice. It's described as embodied, involving interiority, movement, presence, attentiveness.
Yeah, it's very holistic. Not just sitting still, not just thinking.
The sources mention categories: observation, ingestion, expression. Let's take observation. Linked to meditation, purity of consciousness, ethics. What does that look like? Similar to Buddhist Vajrayasan.
Observation, or guan, covers various meditations, focusing on breath, visualizing things internally, aiming for that xingsu, that empty mind state, cultivating stillness, jing.
Okay.
While the goal, purity of consciousness, is similar to Buddhist aims, the methods might differ. Taoist meditation often really emphasizes integrating mind and body, cultivating that internal energy, the qi.
Right, we talked about ki.
And the ethical part is often about living in harmony, not disrupting the natural flow. Similar outcomes to Buddhist ethics maybe, but perhaps framed a bit differently, less about karma and rebirth, more about aligning with the Tao here and now.
Then ingestion, diet, energetic awareness, absorbing cosmic ki. That's more than just nutrition.
Oh yeah, much more.
How does that compare to, say, yogic or Ayurvedic ideas about food?
There are overlaps. Mindful eating, avoiding things that deplete energy, choosing foods that nourish, similar to balancing doshas in Ayurveda, perhaps. But the Taoist focus is very specifically on qi,
How so?
There are specific foods thought to build qi, practices like Big O fasting, not just to cleanse, but to consciously absorb universal qi from the cosmos, from the air. It's about actively taking in and refining energy through what you consume or don't consume.
And expression. Strengthening the body,
Yeah.
facilitating numinous pervasion. Sounds active.
It is. This is where you get things like Qigong, Tai Chi, Taoist yoga forms.
Not just exercise then.
No, no. There are ways to consciously cultivate and circulate qi, harmonize your energy, and open yourself up to the Tao's influence, that numinous pervasion idea.
Yeah.
It's like feeling permeated by the universe's vital energy, a deep connection, maybe like flow states or energetic openings you might hear about in yoga or other deep practices. It's transformation through mindful movement.
This gets really specific. The sources mention the Taoist alchemical body. 3 passes on the spine, tongue as crimson dragon, throat as 12-storied tower, points like Bai Hui, Mingmen,
Right, the Niden internal alchemy map.
very much like Chinese medicine points. And it stresses both stillness and movement, but movement rooted in awareness. What does this detailed map offer, especially thinking about subtle body practices you know?
It's fascinating, isn't it? This map is core to Naden. These points, the passes, the fields, or dantian, are nodes for transforming your basic energies. Jing, essence, qi, vitality, qin, spirit.
Transforming them how?
Refining them, raising them, circulating them, often along the spine. Visualized as passing through those gates like the tailbone gate or jade pillow. The tongue connects circuits, the throat is a key passage. It's a whole inner technology.
So similar to chakras and nadis.
Very similar concept, yes. A different map, different terminology, but the same core idea of an energetic anatomy that you can consciously work with for transformation. And that link between stillness and movement is stillness builds the awareness needed for the movement practices to actually cultivate and circulate the queel effectively. It's deeply integrated.
Okay, now the shift to Taoist religion. The sources distinguish philosophical Taoism, Laozi, Zhuangzi from the later religion with techniques, rituals.
Right, aiming for more practical outcomes like turning bad luck around, achieving transcendence, or even immortality.
As someone who studies religions, is that transition common, philosophy to religion?
Oh, absolutely. You see it everywhere. The deep philosophical insights are profound, but often a bit abstract for everyday life. A religious framework makes it more accessible, provides community, rituals, ways to engage on a more practical, communal level, addresses needs for healing, meaning, connection.
So these religious organizations pop up Wage, Jin, Northern, and Southern dynasties. They offer services, life cultivation methods.
And that's how Taoism really spreads, takes root beyond just the intellectuals. These groups connected the high philosophy to the people.
They were vital for transmission then.
Crucial. They trained people, codified texts, passed down lineages, provided community support. They ensured Taoism survived and thrived.
We hear about the celestial masters, the Tianchi lineage from Zhang Daling, then Shangqing Lingbao schools, and compiling canons like the Yunji Qifan. How does this compare to, say, Buddhist schools and canons developing?
You see clear parallels. The Celestial Masters had this early organized structure, even hereditary leadership sometimes, like some early Buddhist orders maybe. Then Shangqing and Lingbao emerged with their own unique scriptures and focus, much like Theravada and Mahayana diverge in Buddhism.
In the canons.
Compiling the Taoist canon, like the Buddhist Tripitaka, was about gathering, preserving, systematizing this huge body of texts, creating an authoritative collection for the tradition. Both valued lineage and text.
Then later, Song Dynasty, the Quanzhen school grows. Wang Chongyang, Qiu Chuji, the Dragon Gate lineage, ordination systems, revitalized monasteries. Why this monastic resurgence then?
Well, the Song was a time of great intellectual ferment. You had strong Buddhist influence, Neo-Confucianism rising. Quanzhen seems like partly a response, offering a rigorous path of inner cultivation within a monastic setting.
More structure.
Yes, more structure, standardized training through ordination. It likely attracted people seeking serious practice and helped Taoism engage more robustly with Buddhism and Neo-Confucianism at that time, gave it renewed energy.
Let's dig into those interactions now. Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, they all came out of that 100 schools period but became dominant. What really set early Taoism apart from Confucianism initially?
The emphasis, I think. Early Taoism, Laozi and Zhuangzi, is all about the natural flow, spontaneity, simplicity, individual freedom wu wei, the uncarved block. Confucianism was focused on social order, hierarchy, rituals, moral rules, duty. Very different orientations. Taoism valued inner wisdom, effortless action. Confucianism valued social harmony through structured roles and ethics.
And this led to tensions, debates, conflicts, especially Weijin period, but also this hybrid Chinese thought emerging. Can you give an example of a debate? What were they arguing about?
They'd argue about basic reality, the best way to live, government. Neo-Taoists, talking about Wu, non-being, would bump up against early Buddhist ideas of emptiness. Confucians might criticize Taoist hermits for ditching social
And
responsibilities.
Taoists hit back?
Yeah, saying Confucian rituals were artificial, stifling naturalness. But these debates weren't just arguments. They helped each tradition sharpen its own ideas and understand the others, leading towards that eventual integration.
It's surprising, though, that Neo-Taoism actually helped Buddhism take root.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but Neo-Taoism really pushed abstract thinking in China. Its focus on metaphysics, on being and non-being, Yu and Wu, created an intellectual space ready for complex Buddhist ideas like emptiness.
Provided a bridge, almost.
Exactly. It gave the Chinese intellectuals some conceptual tools and a philosophical language to grapple with these sophisticated Indian ideas when they arrived.
And the influence went both ways, especially later with Neo-Confucianism in the Song, Yuan Ming, integrating Buddhist and Taoist ideas.
Absolutely. Constant dialogue. Zhu Junyi using yin-yang, 5 phases that's Taoist cosmology within a Confucian framework. Lu Juyun's school of mind drawing heavily on Chan, or Zen, Buddhism.
Can you give another example of that mixing?
Zushi, maybe the most famous Neo-Confucian.
Yeah.
His whole system relies heavily on Lai principle, which has echoes of Buddhist metaphysics. And Wang Yang later in the school of mind, really emphasized intuition, direct experience, very Chan's influence, shifting focus inward, much like Taoism and Buddhism did. It made Confucianism much richer, more comprehensive.
And emperors got involved. Tang favoring Taoism, making the Tao Te Ching an exam text. Others backing Buddhism.
Yeah, imperial patronage was huge. It meant money, temples, official status, promotion. Whichever tradition was in favor could really flourish.
But it could cut both ways, presumably.
Oh, definitely. Fall out of favor, and you could face suppression. Politics mattered.
We also hear about formal debates, like that disputation on the Taoist Goose discourse, and also just blending at the folk level, especially by the Ming. How did all that shape things?
The formal debates pushed intellectual clarity, forced traditions to defend and refine their ideas. The folk blending shows how these elite ideas seeped into everyday life, mixing with local beliefs. Created that incredibly diverse Chinese religious landscape where you see elements of all three everywhere.
Fast forward to modern times. Westernization hits, but then a revival of the three teachings. Figures like Heelan wanting a dialectical view. But Taoism faced challenges in the Republic era.
Yeah, the 20th century was tough for many traditional practices, modernization, secularism. While Confucianism and Buddhism found ways to adapt or engage globally, some aspects of traditional Taoism struggled.
But there's interest now.
Definitely. Things like Taiji, Qigong, meditation are popular globally for health, stress relief. The core Taoist ideas, harmony with nature, inner peace, seem very relevant today. Adapting that ancient wisdom is the key, I think.
Okay, let's circle back specifically to Buddhism and other contemplative paths using your expertise. We've seen lots of parallels. Taoist stillness and Buddhist samadhi, similar goals, subtle differences.
Both value mental stillness immensely, foundational for insight, quieting the noise. But maybe the flavor differs slightly. Taoist stillness often feels like emptying to align with the Taoist flow, a kind of receptive awareness. Buddhist samadhi is often about focused concentration, maybe more analytical, aimed at insight into impermanence, suffering, no self, leading towards nibbana, liberation from the cycle. Taoist liberation might be framed more as returning to your natural, spontaneous self within the flow. Similar direction, maybe slightly different destinations emphasized.
It is interesting about the 7 lucky gods in Shinto having Taoist origins, and Tang emperors putting Taoism first sometimes shows the ebb and flow.
Absolutely. And Buddhism becoming Chinese wasn't just Buddhism changing, it changed China, including Taoism, Huayan and Zen influencing Neo-Confucianism. As Zhao Puchu pointed out, it's all interconnected.
One last point, the supernatural. Later Taoism has pantheons, but the early Zhuangzi just talks about a plethora of creatures.
Right, less structured divinity early on, more about strange and wonderful beings.
And the sages in Zhuangzi, one with the Tao having these amazing magical abilities. From your meditation experience, how does that idea resonate? Maybe not literal magic, but the potential of consciousness.
That's a great way to look at it. The sage in Zhuangzi represents what's possible when you totally align with the fundamental nature of reality, the Tao. Those abilities could be seen as the natural result of that alignment, not breaking laws of nature, but embodying them fully.
Like siddhis in yoga.
Exactly. Many traditions speak of extraordinary capacities arising from deep practice. Whether you call it oneness with Tao or realizing emptiness, the idea is that profound inner change unlocks potential beyond the everyday. The framework differs, but the core idea of transformation leading to expanded capacity seems universal across these paths.
So I've covered a lot. Early history, Laozi, Zhuangzi, core ideas like Dao and Qi, the practices observation, ingestion, expression, the alchemical body, then the religion developing, its interactions with Confucianism, Buddhism.
And crucially, trying to connect it all back to your background in Buddhism and meditation, highlighting those points of contact and contrast.
Right, hopefully providing a deeper appreciation for Taoism within that wider Eastern context you know so well.
Yes, hopefully resonating with your knowledge and your direct experience too.
So, a final thought to leave you with. We have the Taoist idea of living in accordance with the natural flow, and the Buddhist focus on understanding reality to transcend suffering. How do you see that relationship between following the flow and seeking liberation? Are they ultimately different paths, or maybe just different ways of talking about the same deep process uncovered through contemplative practice? Something to mull over. We hope this deep dive has been insightful and sparked some new connections for you.